The gentlelady, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe the hearings about the environment and how do we clean the air. I'm from Southern California, so I know the unique characteristics of Long Beach and LA both. It seems like we have a problem with the wait time at the gates, some trucks parking in residential neighborhoods. Subsidies has been a question here. How leases are issued to independent drivers. But Mr. Holmes, you said you need different standards. You have unique characteristics, and you believe that somehow that these impact the environment. Is a truck different when it arrives at the LA harbor than it is when it arrives at the Long Beach harbor? The same truck?
I think the short answer is the truck is not different, but the conditions.
Thank you. No, the truck. If the truck meets the standards, we're talking about the environment. I heard your testimony, but 90% of the trucks that come through the harbors are independents or owner-operators. 10% are employee operators. Mr. Lilo, you have been able to meet all the standards applied to you earlier than required. You have met the 80% reduction with no change in the existing situation as far as an employee driver versus an owner-operator. Is that not true?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Mr. Holmes, you have come 70%, which is very close to meeting the required implements placed upon you to meet environmental standards, with 90% being independent and 10% being employee drivers. Is that not true?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. So the issue here seems to be not the environment and not air quality, which I thought we were going to talk about, because Southern California, that's a huge concern. Grace, you and I spend a lot of time down in that area. You know it very well. I don't think the issue is who drives a truck. I think the issue we have here is, does that truck meet the standards? Now, if the truck does not meet the standards, then the truck should not be able to operate. Now, the problem we have in California is only 4% of the trucks in California service the harbor. So you have 96% of all the trucks in California have nothing to do with the Port of Long Beach or the Port of Los Angeles on there. Mr. Lilo, have you found any difference in compliance based on whether the driver are employee or independent owner operators, period?
None whatsoever,
None whatsoever. Mr. Holmes, during this time period, do you require harbor drivers to be employed?
No, sir, not at
this time. No, you
don't.
Has the program been successful so far to reduce it by 70% under current circumstances? You have met that standard, is that not correct?
Well, we haven't achieved the 80%.
You have met 70% without any change at all, and you're way ahead of the requirement placed upon you, and based on the time frame you're implemented with, you will meet the 80% very shortly, because all the trucks coming into the harbor must meet the new standards. Is that not correct? Do you allow trucks that are 1966 that don't meet the standards come in the harbor?
No, sir.
You don't. So in order to come into the harbor, you have to meet the standards based upon the requirements the law has imposed upon this. Is that not true?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And I'm really confused at this point, because if we're strictly dealing with air quality standards, which is the emphasis of this committee hearing, and I applaud the chairman for holding a hearing based on those standards, because we have had standard qualities in California in the past, and we need to adequately address those standards. But I have the Port of Long Beach here and the Port of Los Angeles here that have standards, and they're meeting the standards. They're making sure that they're being forced at the gates. The problems I see is that the waiting time is too long. So we need to effectively deal with something internally at the harbors to deal with the waiting time. That should have been what this hearing is about. How do we deal with that? If there's off-site parking in Los Angeles that's being done and it's not practical and it should not be allowed, that's something they should deal with, local parking standards in local neighborhoods. But lease agreements, that's not an air quality issue for me. I was an independent contractor in the building industry. I started off as a framer in the union. I was a union carpenter. I went into business for myself. How I decided to borrow money from a bank was a decision I made on my own, as an independent contractor here makes on his own whether they want to enter into a lease to lease a truck or not. If they're entering into a lease, and I know Walmart, Target, many of these companies work with their drivers, they will finance the rig to be able to provide transportation for their goods coming from the harbor. And when you have 90% of the truckers hauling from the harbors, to say we're going to eliminate that percentage and give it to 10%, something has to happen in the marketplace that's not good for the marketplace. Competition's eliminated, and that directly is going to impact costs. Plus, you have 15 million unemployed Americans, and at the harbor, we want to tell some of these people who are employed, no, you can't work. Now, why would we do that to the American people? If the issue here is truly environmental standards, and we have placed requirements on these trucks that they have to meet the environmental standards, it does not make sense to me to discriminate against any individual in this country because they do not happen to work for a given company. They want to be self-employed. Some people want to be self-employed. Some people want to determine when they want to work, when they want to go on vacation. If they want to work 60 hours a week, I remember working 7 days a week, 6 in the morning till 6 at night. I did it because I wanted to. I could have stayed working for the framing company that I worked for and been a carpenter, no problem. I chose to be an independent contractor. These companies are meeting the standards. If they are meeting the standards, it makes no sense to me to say to them, no, you cannot work because we just don't want you to work. And that's what this debate has been about. I enjoyed both of your testimony. Mr. Lytle, you're meeting the standards in the system as it is today. Mr. Holmes, I admit no respect to you, sir. I think you will meet the standards shortly without the system changing at all. To eliminate 90% of the workforce using the harbor based on issues of waiting time, subsidies, how leases are dealt with is not an issue Congress should deal with. And I thank you, Chairman. Yield back the balance of my time.